Good afternoon, friends. David Wright here, and I am your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by Claudionor Coelho Jr. Claudionor, it's a pleasure to have you on, my friend.
Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Claudionor, for those who may not be familiar with your current role, can you just tell everyone, and it's there pretty prominently in the back of your screen, but maybe for those who are listening, and your current role and organization you're affiliated with?
Yes, I'm the Chief AI Officer at Zscaler. Zscaler is runs the largest cybersecurity cloud in the world, protecting businesses in the cloud.
Absolutely. I've been, as a IT and digital professional, very familiar with Zscaler, so was excited to see your name come across my desk, and to talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing in regard to AI, without making this a commercial for Zscaler. But before any of that, well, a couple things. One, we like to start every episode with one piece of actionable advice you might leave the listeners with today.
So when you say like advice, I'm assuming like for their career, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be for their career, it could be for their security posture, it could be for really, you could take it any direction you'd like.
Well, let me start with the advice for their career. I did my PhD in semiconductor, and I have switched areas like every 5 years. That people should not be afraid of change, because change happens whether you like it or not.
You nailed that. That's a great piece of advice. So, and I think that actually dovetails into the way I like to start the episodes, which is kind of finding out a little bit more about you as a person, as a leader, Claudionor, how you started out and how you got to the point that you're at in your career today. So maybe you could just share a little bit about your journey.
I did my PhD in the 90s at Stanford University on semiconductor. And at the time, just to give an idea, this stuff that I created had very limited use in semiconductor. But with AI acceleration now, the techniques that I created, the people are using those techniques. And so it took like more than 20 years for people to start to use the techniques that I created, or to become like mainstream. And because of that, I started working in different areas, and I was even teaching in universities in Brazil. And then I brought like semiconductor to Brazil. Like I sold a company to Cadence Design Systems. And then I moved back to the US. And then after several positions, I ended up in Google doing research. The stuff that I did was used by CERN. And after we published a paper in Nature, I was thinking like, how could I contribute to society? And then I figured out, okay, cybersecurity is an area that could use the knowledge that I have. And then I switched it to cybersecurity. And that's why I'm at Zscaler.
Yeah, I love it. But I think, it's a perfect example of living the advice you gave earlier, which is kind of staying open to opportunities that present themselves and following a greater purpose, it seems, of, how can I have the biggest impact given the gifts that have been bestowed on me, So Claudionor, I mean, if you think back to this journey, what would you say was one of the most challenging moments that you had? Something that you either had a project fail, or you had some sort of personal hardship or other professional hardship, but ultimately you took away a profound kind of lesson. Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
Actually, if you look over my LinkedIn page, you're only going to see like my success cases, but I actually learn more with my failures than with my success, because that makes me a stronger person. And that basically, I figure out what I have to do next time in order not to fail it again. And one of the examples that I in my early career that I can mention to you is that initially I would basically tell people what they had to do. And one day, like after the project was not delivered on time, like a long time ago, people came to me and said, you create the schedule. You did not discuss the schedule with us. So now you have to give the excuse to your boss on why the project is not delivered. And that taught me like a very good lesson that I have to listen to people, and everything needs to be agreed upon with the developers in order to be able to achieve something, to deliver
Yeah.
something.
No, that's a great lesson. And I've had to learn that myself as well. Also kind of enrolling the various stakeholders, even, both the contributors on the project I've found, and as well as the customers, of the product, particularly for organizations that are rolling out, technologies that are going to impact other operational groups. How am I taking the time to educate them and include them in the overarching vision and whatever they can contribute to, such that they don't feel put on when I get to the implementation phase. What other, you've already nailed, Claudionor, a great piece of advice, some good lessons there from, as you guys built things. Any other important things that you learned over the course of your life, if you're thinking what life was like prior to learning them and after learning them? I want to get more into Zscaler, but like you've had quite a remarkable tenure at these other organizations. So just curious if any other important things you'd like to share with us.
Yes, I think one of the latest learnings that I have is that the more I delve into cybersecurity and into AI, remember 2 years ago, there was like maybe 3 years ago, there was no LLM. Well, there was LLM, but there was no ChatGPT. And then the world changed quite a bit in the last 3 years. And the changes will not stop this year. They're just going to accelerate. And people should not be afraid of those changes. They're here to stay. And the only thing that people need to be concerned or to be aware is the speed of change, because never in history of humankind things changed so fast. And I usually mention to people like this: the first cellular phone call was made in 72 or 73 in New York. And people were basically holding like a cell phone that was this big. And if you went to people around you at that time and said, do you want to make a cell phone call? They would say, what is a cell phone? People did not know. And right now, people are basically saying that they have like the LLMs. They know how to interact with LLMs. My daughter, as an example, she used the LLM as her personal assistant. If she's going to visit some place or needs to prepare like the week, she basically has some prompts that help her prepare the week. And I find that's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, we're building a tool for our discovery process that helps automate, some of the questions that we ask and the summarization of the data that we collect. We're leveraging it for report writing, and I mean, there's a ton of use cases. The impact that we're seeing it have on knowledge management, which is a topic that I think will become even more and more publicized in the technology community as baby boomers continue to retire, and institutional knowledge, like how are we properly capturing that and making that accessible to future generations. I mean, there's coupled with the fact that a lot of these organizations that we encounter, often their data and their knowledge is segmented and hard to access fundamentally outside the knowledge that's kept in people's heads. So how are we leveraging AI to ingest that data, index that data, there's a lot of opportunity there, and there's some companies doing some really cool stuff. So, I mean, that's
And just one comment, you have to understand that most of those processes in organizations or even in life, they're not documented. And we need to start documenting those processes in order to be able to understand and to optimize them.
yeah. I mean, that's a great way to summarize that for sure. So Claudionor, I want to talk more about what you guys are up to at Zscaler. Before I do, or before we get into that, I always like to ask favorite book or literary piece, either that you've been reading recently or all time. Your call.
Okay, the favorite book that I have used in previous organization when I was leading engineering teams was like, it's kind of like a book, old book, open quote old. It's called Competing on the Edge. And that book basically outlines what we're doing right now, because that book basically talks about how organizations, they need to be like a very process driven. They cannot operate on the chaos, but they need to operate on especially in high tech, they need to operate on the edge of chaos. They need actually to have they need to be chaotic enough so that they can adjust to change, but they still have minimum processes. And those are the days right now, if you think about it.
Yeah, yeah. And when was that book written?
I think it was 1980, 1998. Okay.
Wow. I mean, it's just wild how applicable that is now more than ever. It makes me think of like agile methodologies too, that I see a lot of organizations struggling with, and yeah, I mean, it all goes back to the pace of change that you mentioned at the beginning of this call that I don't think people quite understand.
I talk to organizations and they're still sometimes struggling to figure out how they're going to incorporate AI into their product or in their solutions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I get it. I get the trepidation, like particularly for organizations that are highly regulated by, HIPAA or FedRAMP or whatever it might be. But at the same time, if you look at, I remember I was at a CEO summit late last year, and is one of those annual situations, and they were showing the McKinsey data about adoption of AI and the significance of those who do and those who don't. And you're liable to be out of business, in the next 5 to 7 years if you are not properly adopting AI.
Yeah, and LLMs is making that rate of change much bigger. And people are saying like last year was the year of LLMs. This year is the year of AI agents. And you can imagine once you have LLMs that are good for text summarization and analysis of text with tools, for example, machine learning predictive tools or any other tools, and everything basically operating together. And you can see the biggest benefit. I have a open source project that I created that writes some of my blogs. And it's amazing to see how well those documents are written after you writing them.
I have a colleague who every year he's been writing books using AI and publishing them under a pseudonym and donating the proceeds to a charity. And he edits them, of course, but each year it's gotten better and better and better. It's wild. So anyway, Claudionor, let's talk a little bit more about Zscaler. So you've been at Zscaler how long now?
18 months, roughly.
18 months. So I've been there 18 months. You're in San Francisco. Talk to me a little bit more about your vision for the organization based on the overall mission of what Zscaler is about, and maybe some of the key initiatives you guys are working on?
So Zscaler mission is to secure, simplify, and transform business. Just to give you an idea, we run the largest cybersecurity cloud in the world. We process over 500 billion transactions per day. And you have to understand that this is more than the number of queries people do for Google per day. And if you imagine this, that you are a company and you want your user to access some resources, we make sure we are the person in the middle that makes sure that you are accessing a service that you can access, and we hide all the IP addresses in a way that attackers cannot get hold of where to attack next. And because of this, because of the amount of data that we process, Zscaler from the beginning, they started analyzing data with machine learning. So I basically say that I joined the company 18 months ago, but the company had already a history of doing machine learning and AI from the inception, because they would not be able to address the amount of data if they were not using AI already.
Mm.
So with LLMs and with generative AI, what is changing in this scenario is that now we can interact with the users in a much more native way. The example that I like to use, for example, last year we released what we call a ZDX Copilot. And if you imagine like the way you interact with software, usually you have to point and click and learn how to. I joke saying that I have been using Excel for more than 20 years now, and I still don't know how to fully use Excel. I don't know about you, but
right. I get that. I totally get that.
But imagine that you can start writing or even talking to the software, and the software understands what you want to do, and they start pulling like widgets from everywhere. And then they start giving you the response, either using like graphically or basically interacting with you. And that's the stage where we are, that software can analyze your intent, detect your intent, and start interacting with the software and with the systems in a much more automated and natural way. And that's one of the roles that the chapters that I run at Zscaler.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very exciting time. The things that I'm seeing this year. I was just at IBM a few weeks ago and seeing what they're doing and other people are doing with agentic AI, and the impact we've seen generative AI have already. It's just tremendous. I made my Christmas cards for my aunt with generative AI.
I did mine too.
I really, it's just astounding the impact that it will continue to have. What about Claudionor, in an organization like yours? Interested to hear about some of the challenges that you guys face as an organization. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah. One of the things that we need to understand is how organizations are going to be prepared for AI. For example, right now, people are talking about coding assistants that can optimize or make like the writing software much more efficient. And we have to understand like our capabilities as an organization and how those new agentic software can help increase our productivity. That's one of the examples on how we are basically looking into that. The other part that you have to understand, that we need to understand is like other internal workflows or even applications people did not even imagine that they could have, and now that they can have because we have agentic AI. So we keep thinking, and those are the things we are looking at. An example that I like to mention is this. Remember that it took a student from University of Florida, Gainesville, to know where Elon Musk was by just looking at his airplane, his private jet. Now, imagine that you have agentic systems analyzing data from everywhere. the amount of information that you're going to be able to uncover and to look at. That people do not realize that the information is just there.
Yeah, no, for sure. It is, a good example of that. I remember, like, so 2 days ago, I was flying home from Rochester. I was at the Bills game in Buffalo, and I was at the airport, and we were asking the lady at the terminal where the plane was because it hadn't arrived yet, and I went online and I just kind of started futzing around, and I found the plane en route to JFK. Still had to go land at JFK, turn around, and come back. So I went and got lunch because I knew it was gonna be a little bit. I think it's important to note too that, like, the significance of data, right? Like, I talked about knowledge management earlier. We talked about knowledge management earlier. The AI is only as good as the data that we feed it, right? And I think that whether it be hallucinations or kind of bad data in, bad data out, I think that it's important that organizations start really tightening up their data kind of policies and their strategy surrounding their data, because it'll only serve them moving forward, really.
Yeah. And another thing that I basically mentioned to people is that it's not only the data, but the relations among the data. The example that I like to mention is the following. We need like a data, what I call data lineage. I'll give an example. Suppose that you wanted to fly like an F-16 and you have like an agentic system with pictures, manuals, and all the information about F-16, and you want to learn to fly an F-16. Actually, you have to understand that there are several versions of the X-16 around with several pictures of cockpits and different manuals like that. The last time I checked, there was like from F-16A to F-16V as in Viper. And if you just ask like an agentic system, I want to fly like an F-16, if the system is not smart enough, and if there is not enough information that there are different in the data, saying that different versions of the F-16, they may give you the wrong instruction, just because you don't have enough information.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And I think that also speaks to the use and significance of confidence scores with agentic AI, and especially when, for example, if I had to fly that F-16 by any means necessary, leading out of getting those instructions, and I got the wrong instructions, that would probably lead to disaster, right? Like, I mean, it wouldn't be good if I was using the wrong instruction manual to fly this jet, and I can think of the applicability of that to other situations where making sure that the right answer is being served up is not insignificant.
And you have to understand another thing, because like the LLMs, they're training a very large corpus of data, but for them, if you basically have like a bunch of words and some of the words, they may be more important for you to ask a question than other words. For the LLM, that may not be the case. And I have this fun example of retrieval augmented generation, where I was asking like a Wright system, like information about gastric cancer, and it was giving me the answer on prostate cancer. Just because it could not detect like which words were the most important on the query that you're trying to make.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's another good example. We're kind of talking a little bit about best practices now. So, I mean, Claudionor, any other best practices that you might recommend to our audience in rolling out AI solutions or developing AI strategy? I'd be interested to hear, how you might advise folks.
That's very interesting. I basically joke in some presentations I give to corporations that, remember, like before the cloud, you used to have like a disks, and disk was limited, disk space was limited. So you would be very careful about storing data. So when that data became obsolete, you would delete the data. And right now, because of cloud and disk space is cheap, people don't delete data anymore. They just put on the cloud. And going to a phase in corporations that people are basically starting to index or to use the data they stored in the cloud into agentic systems without basically detecting if the data is up to date, data became obsolete. That F-16 is an example of that. People are not looking into that. And I joked saying that my next job, I was going to be hiring librarians to organize data the same way they organize books. Okay. And the reason for that is that we need our data organization to be treated like very seriously in corporations in order to be successful. As you mentioned, data is the most valuable piece of asset any company has.
I'm thinking of a new role, a data librarian.
Yeah, that could be.
I like that. I could see that role. Claudionor, I mean, obviously everything we're talking about right now speaks to kind of the future of where we're heading with technologies, but how are you guys planning to continue to leverage innovative technologies in your business to support your customers, and kind of where are you guys headed in regard to, you know, AI or any other kind of innovative technologies that you're excited about?
Yeah, we recently released a AI monitoring tool. Remember, everyone wants to use LLMs, but you don't want to send like confidential information to LLM. So we need to monitor that. And we need, if someone basically writes something he or she should not be writing to an LLM interaction like ChatGPT, then we need to block that. Imagine that you are an HR person and you're going to terminate Claudionor, and the person wants to write a termination letter, and then he or she puts the letter on ChatGPT with my name, with all the information for me. So you probably don't want that information to go to an LLM. So we have been looking into, and we released a product that does monitoring of LLM interactions and agentic interactions in order to protect customers.
That's cool, because that's a big concern, is that, you know, people have just employees that are kind of playing around with the tools. How does it manage to block that at the point of interaction? Like, I mean, so I'm on my computer, I guess in the building or VPNing in, like, and I can be in GPT and I'm typing, or I'm attaching that letter that you mentioned, for example, and then I hit enter, and what happens?
So remember, Zscaler is like the person in the middle of the interaction of you and the cloud. So whenever you're going to do an interaction with ChatGPT, for example, we basically first you do an interaction with Zscaler. Zscaler checks the content to see if there's no toxicity, if there is no PII information, confidential information transmitting in that, if you don't have social security numbers, credit cards, and things like that. And then if there are techniques that we can use, like anonymization of the user, or even saying, you cannot send this, I'm not going to send you this information.
And I could build different rules to say, because, like, for example, another thing that we've seen that I don't know if all organizations realize is, like, different sales or marketing arms of companies inputting all their, like, strategic plans for the year into GPT. And then, like, if I wanted to, if they had done that, I could then go from my computer a million miles away and just say, hey, what's XYZ's company's strategy? And if they had actually inputted that to the system, then I'd be able to just suck that right up.
Especially if this data somehow is used to train the LLM. People have shown that you can extract the training data from LLMs. Remember, one of the easiest cases now that the LLMs block is to basically write this. Writes I love salmon, for example, 1,000 times. And at some point, the LLM used to leak out the training data that involved salmon, for example. This is just an example. Right now, they're blocking that. They have instructions during the post-training that whenever you're asking this type of question, they block. But this was one of the ways people realized that they could leak out information. And there are other ways. Usually, the way that I basically talk to people is this. If the information can be queried, it can be extracted in LLM or in an agentic system.
Right. Yeah, super interesting. So Claudionor, a few last questions for you. One would be, so acknowledging you don't have a crystal ball, what do you think will be some of the biggest changes as time passes, as it pertains either to cybersecurity or, IT services in general, AI? Just interested to hear where you see the industry headed.
So I like to mention that there were like a few reports from last year saying that there is a shortage of cybersecurity professionals, okay, both in executive levels and at operational levels. And because of that, one of what we're looking at into how to automate processes using AI and generative AI, and you're going to see more and more of that happening in the market because we want like the operators and the cybersecurity people to be able to analyze data faster or accurately and give response to incidents in a better way, like with less error. And you have to understand that both us and the bad guys, they're using generative AI. So on the other hand, you're going to see the types of attacks that are going to be more intricate because they're going to use like LLMs to do more correlations and to do that. And because of that, then we need to faster detect new types of attacks. Okay. So it ends up being like a mouse and a cat kind of game. And you have to understand that, unfortunately, we need to actually to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah, I was telling my wife the other day that unfortunately, hackers typically have an advantage because they can first try to find a creative way around anything that's been established today. And then we're kind of on the defensive, needing to block that new methodology. The only way that, to combat that is, are there ways to be predictive as to what that might be in order to block that preemptively, which is a whole nother, but a perfect use case for predictive AI, So,
and I like to mention like everyone in his or her life has received an email of Prince of Nigeria who wants to share his wealth with you. And the first email that I got was like from 2002. And the issue is that those attacks have become much more sophisticated.
Well, get this. I mean, if I just sorry to interrupt you, Claudionor, but it's just so timely. So last night, it was about 5, 6 o'clock. I get a call from what seems to be like a number that I don't know. I picked it up, and it was an automated call from affirm.com. I guess Affirm is a company you can pay over time. I've never used it, but they were saying that there was a charge for $1,000 to Peloton. And I was like, interesting. It was very well done. And it was only, they asked me to press a number and I was like, all right, I'll bite. I want to hear what it says. And like, I press 1 and then it's like the messaging they used from the text to speech wasn't quite professional enough. Like it was like, it sounded, kind of sketchy. It's like, oh, we will take care of this for you right away. I was like, no, it sounded like kind of ESL, like English as a second language almost. But I got a text message. Your code is 148738. Do not share it. We'll never call or text to ask for it. So they were doing the whole thing, and it was well done. It was well done.
And I'll just give an example. And I have received recently an email, which was a phishing email of this type. Suppose that someone attacks some provider that has your identity and they have information from you. For example, suppose they attack your credit card and they have some expenses that you have done on your credit card. So now they send an email saying, do you recognize those expenses? And those that you did, those are real expenses that you did. And then they say, if you don't recognize any of them, or if you recognize, click here. So at that time, they have lowered your guard because they put truthful information about you that only you and your provider should know. And because of that, they have lowered your guard and you are more inclined to click on that link.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Just have to be extra vigilant nowadays, especially with all the leaks. I mean, the odds of your data, personal information being leaked as a US citizen are incredibly high. I don't know. I couldn't give an exact percentage, but based on all the leaks that have happened with all the major corporations, even if it wasn't a significant security breach, right? But there was a data leak such that all the records of all their customers were leaked. I mean, it's got to be 70%, 80% of people, you know?
Social security number is out on the dark web because I monitor that and I receive like every time that it appears on the dark web.
Same. And I get an email every few months that it's like, you better change your passwords. Your stuff's been leaked again. But anyway, Claudionor, this has been awesome. I mean, I love having conversations like this. We like to end the episode with just a question. If you could go back 5, 10, 15 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self? Other than buy more Amazon stuff.
Question. The first advice that I would give is that nothing happens as you planned. Life is fluid and you should enjoy the journey.
I think as a young person, I definitely lost sight of enjoying the journey. You know, it was always like, what's next? Like okay, I did that. Now what's next? And I think that mindfulness of being present and, for me, grateful for the opportunity that I'm in the moment is something that came with lessons learned, but I couldn't agree more. So that's a great way to end the episode. Claudionor, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure on my side as well.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We will catch you all next week.